So we're looking at a Firefox plugin called SQlite Manager. And this is one of the tools that we can use in conjunction with developing mobile applications on Android to interact with the database file. So what happens is that the mobile phone can create a SQlite database inside of the phone, and after populating it with content, we can actually pull that DB file back out of the memory of the phone onto the PC desktop and examine it here. And that's what we're doing. So we're looking at a sample table and sample content in that table. The first row has the values for longitude, latitude, altitude, 123.1, 456.1, and 789.1. The basic idea here is that we have a table structure, and this create table statement is something that we're going to take a look at under Android. We're going to fire this off from Java. And then for the actual content that populates the columns of data in the rows, we're going to avoid using raw SQL. We're allowed to, but it's better to use another object called the content values object because it manages the content better. For example, if we have an apostrophe inside of a text string, we don't want to early terminate that text string. And the escape sequences are automatically handled when we use these objects. So now that we understand where we're headed, we have a database file that we're creating inside the mobile phone. We're looking at a copy of that file through the Firefox browser using this plugin called SQlite Manager. So let's bounce then over into the Eclipse developer environment and take a look at this application. So it's the standard format that we've used for all the applications here. This is called AppDev Android SQlite project. And basically it has a Java class file for the user interface, the code behind the user interface. There are generated files, or there's one generated file that contains content, r.java, and that has the references to different objects that we use in the user interface. So in this example, the key reference here is to the string called AppDev Android create table. It's a SQL statement to create the table that we're going to work with here in this example. So if we look at the values here under strings XML, we can see the create table statement, and actually this was created from Firefox and then copy paste into this view. And we can actually read that at runtime inside the Java class file here. So at runtime, basically what happens is that we're creating a class, which is an activity. It's extending activity. And as we look at this, we can see that there's an onCreate method. You can see the output here to the log file, just step by step. And the way that this works is that when the application starts on the mobile phone, we're going to create an instance of this object, SQlite opener, open helper. And basically it's a modified version of the base class within the Android development environment. And let's take a look at what that does. So if we look at S04E01, we extend on top of SQlite open helper, but we modify a couple of things. We say on create when the create event occurs. Now this is not the create event for the application when it launches in the mobile phone. It's saying whenever we want to open up this database. So basically what happens is that when the database gets open, if there is not already an instance of the file, it's going to create that file. And within that process, it's going to fire off an SQL statement to create the table that we already looked at under Firefox in the SQlite Manager. And it's the same table structure that we just looked at under strings.xml. So S04E01 is basically our driver, our database driver to connect to that data source. And once we have it, then we can do things with it, like reference the content values. So under content values, we're populating longitude, latitude, and altitude with these numbers right here. We just saw those pop up on the SQlite Manager under Firefox. And on that database, then, we're going to fire off a command. So the steps are A, create an instance of this modified SQlite open helper. B, have the content values ready to go. C, turn on record locking for that file. And then go ahead and execute the SQL statement. So those are the basic 3 steps that we use whenever we interact with a database under SQlite. We're looking at the SQlite database running on the Android mobile phone, and we're taking a look at the class libraries that allow us to interact with that database. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the SQlite database object. This is basically the object that allows us to get a record locking handle to the data file that we're working with. The second object that we're going to take a look at is the content values object, and this is something like under Visual Studio, the command object that allows us to pass in parameters to avoid executing raw SQL statements against the database. And finally, we'll take a look at this command called insert or throw that basically says insert a new record into a SQL table, or else throw a Java exception that could be handled through exception handling.